Good morning, friends. Welcome to the UnApologetic. Let's get straight into it because I've got a good one today. Lots of verses to read out. So, straight into it. This one came about, give a bit of backstory. Last night we were having a prayer meeting and we were talking about praying for Australia and talking about how Australia has the tall poppy syndrome and how we don't really like someone who is talking themselves up, putting themselves out there, making themselves look good. So what do we do with the tall poppies? We cut them down. Don't know if you've heard that saying if you're my international friends, but that's what we sort of have in Australia. And the other saying that came to mind while we were talking about this was too big for your boots. And as I was thinking about this saying, I'm like, wait a minute, that saying doesn't actually make sense. So too big for your boots, if you don't know, means that you're thinking more highly of yourself than you should. But if you are trying to be bigger than you actually are, then you wouldn't be too big for your boots. You'd be wearing boots that are too big for you. Don't you think? And it made me think of, how little kids wear their mummy or daddy's shoes. The little prancing around their little high heels or clomping in daddy's boots. Because why? They want to be like mummy or daddy. They want to be bigger. And so I was thinking about this saying and thinking, well, if someone says you're too big for your boots, just get bigger boots. And so I was thinking about that, and then the story of David fighting Goliath came to mind. Everyone thought David was too big for his boots, and they told him so. But he didn't listen to them. He knew he was there for a purpose. He knew, hey, no, something's not right here. I know who I am in God, and I am not going to take no for an answer. So let's look at the story of David and Goliath. Firstly, I want to look back just before that, where David was anointed as king. So we're looking at 1 Samuel chapters 16 and 17. And again, I encourage you to go back and read this whole thing, because that is very important to get the contents, get the context, get the whole story, and see all of that. Now, just let me check here. Excuse me a moment that this is streaming properly, because I am not sure if we are or not. Let us have a look. I've had streaming problems previously, so I want to make sure I'm catching you. Yep, there we go. All working. Awesome. All right, so follow along with me if you can in 1 Samuel 16, and I'll just pick out a few verses, but please go back and look at it all. So, context to the story. So, King Saul, he's the king of Israel, but he messed up, he sinned, and God said, you are no longer going to be king. He is still king, but not for much longer. So God tells the prophet Samuel to go and anoint one of Jesse's sons in Bethlehem. And so Samuel goes to Jesse, who's got 8 sons, and says, one of your sons is going to be king. Let me anoint him. And starting from the oldest, he goes through, looks at the sons, and God tells him each son yes or no. So we're going to start from chapter 1 Samuel 16, verse 6 and 7. When they came, he looked on Eliab, which is the oldest, and thought, surely the Lord's anointed is now before the Lord. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. And so each son is brought before Samuel, but God says no. Verse 10, Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, and Samuel said to Jesse, the Lord has not chosen any of these. Samuel said to Jesse, are all your sons here? And he said, there remains yet the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, send for him, for we will not sit down until he comes here. Now here's the first part where you get an indication that David was sort of pushed aside, not really considered as anything great. When Samuel said, bring your sons before me, they didn't even think, or maybe they did think to bring David, but they thought, oh no, it's not going to be him, so we won't bother. He wasn't even asked to come. How much of an insult is that to begin with? He was off guarding the sheep. So let's pick it up. For we will not sit down until he comes here. He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. The Lord said, rise and anoint him, for this is the one. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. Wow. So what a story, hey? Here David, the youngest of the sons, youngest of 8, is anointed as king in the presence of his brothers. And as we read on the story, what happens next is David continues to watch his father's sheep, but he also goes back and forth to King Saul to play the harp for him to soothe Saul's tormented soul. Saul was tormented by evil spirits and went into fits of madness, but when David played the harp, he would be soothed. So he went back and forth doing these two things. So there is David, who knows he is going to be king, but yet he still serves his father by watching the sheep. He still serves the current king by playing music for him. Okay, let's pick it up now at chapter 17, verses 4 to 7. So here, the Philistine army has come against the Israelite army. They're gathered together at Sukkot, which I've been to, which is actually really cool. It's one of the valleys there. You've got the hill on one side, the hill on the other side where the two armies are, and the valley in between, dividing them. And from verse 4, and there came out of the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Now that is about 9.5 feet, which is tall. If you think about your average ceiling height, that is 8 feet. So add another 45 centimeters onto that, and you've got the height of Goliath. This is a scary guy. He was tall and he was strong. Let's have a look at his armor. He had a helmet of bronze on his head. He was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, which is roughly 70 kilos. Pretty much the weight of another person. He had greaves of bronze on his legs and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the head of the spear weighed 600 shekels of iron. The head of the spear, so not the whole spear itself, but just the head of the spear, was 600 shekels, which was about 7 kilos. This is heavy armor, and his shield bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, why have you come out to draw for battle? Am I not a Philistine? Are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, today I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So here he is saying, come at me. You guys suck. See if you can beat me, sort of thing. I defy the ranks of Israel. That's a fairly strong challenge. So let's continue on. I'll just sum up the few verses. David's 3 oldest brothers were in the army. Now the army age was, let me fill you in a bit here because this is important. The army age is 20 plus, 20 to 60. So his 3 older brothers were older than 20, which leaves 4 brothers under the age of 20 and between his age. So if you think that there was a son born every year, which that's pretty close together. They had a lot of kids back in those days, but one son a year means only 3 months between giving birth and getting pregnant, which is not much time. There could have been twins. There was a lot of twins in those times as well, within the Israelites and Jacob, Israel's family. So there's that as well. But the oldest David probably would have been was 15. He could have even been as young as 12, maybe even 10. We're not sure. It doesn't say. But we know he was considered still to be a youth. So David was given the job of taking some food and supplies to his older brothers and to bring back to his father a report of how are they going. So David goes, brings the food, and while he's there, he sort of checks out what's going on because he hears the call that Goliath has given, and he gets a little annoyed at this and says, how dare he? So it's 40 days of this that the army was too scared. Every day Goliath would come out and say, choose a man to fight me. I defy you. But they were too afraid to go and face him. And here David comes, a young little upstart, pretty much. So they kind of call him. Who's just guarding his father's sheep. But he's like, no training. But he comes and says, how dare you? If no one else is going to fight him, I will. So let's take it from chapter 17, verse 25, and read a whole chunk here. The Israelites said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. The king will greatly enrich the man who kills him, and will give him his daughter and make his family free in Israel. David said to the men who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills the Philistine and takes away this reproach from Israel? And I love this line. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? So among the Israelites, that's a pretty, It's a pretty big insult to call someone uncircumcised. It's you're not one of us. You're one of them. You're dirty. You're unclean. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? The people answered him in the same way, so it shall be done for the man who kills him. His eldest brother Eliab heard him talking to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. He said, why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? So to me that sort of sounds like, why are you not doing the job you're supposed to be doing? But those few sheep even sounds like that job you're doing isn't even important. But why aren't you doing it anyway? Let's continue. I know the presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down just to see the battle. Now that's, his father's asked him to come. That is a pretty harsh statement. But David says, what have I done now? It was only a question. he turned away from him and towards another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. So I love this. He's not getting the answer he wants or needs from his brother. He's not listening to his brother's derogatory comments, but he goes and asks another person. Continue from verse 31. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. David said to Saul is the king, "Let no one's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go down and fight with this Philistine." Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against the Philistine to fight with him, for you are just a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But what does David reply? I love this. But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth. And if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God." David said, "The Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will save me from the hand of this Philistine." So Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." So David may have been out with the sheep thinking, this is an unimportant job. What am I doing out here? They're just sending me away to get out under their feet. Like his older brother said, those few sheep on the hill, seemingly unimportant job that you just stuck out in the middle of nowhere that no one notices. But it was David's training ground. And as we read in chapter 16, when I think God was with David even before this, but when David was anointed, what does it say? The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. And so he continued to watch those sheep, but he knew who he was in God. He knew he was a child of the living God. He was an Israelite, God's chosen people. He knew this, and he claimed that victory. And so Saul said to David, "Go, may the Lord be with you." Now, I've given the example of get bigger boots. So here it seems to contradict my sort of picture of a little kid wearing his daddy's boots. But stay with me in this. So next what happens is Saul tries to fit David out in his armor. And I was wondering about this. Now, the story goes that the armor doesn't fit. It doesn't say that it is too big, but we suppose it's too big. And David is just simply not used to it. It doesn't work. But we can probably assume it's too big. David is still a boy. Saul is described as being a head higher than everyone else. So everyone else only came up to his shoulder height. So King Saul is a tall, big guy. This armor is not going to work. But what else I wondered was, why does Saul give David his own armor? Why doesn't he go out for a start and find armor that would fit better? And then armor is a very personal thing. He straps on his own helmet, his own armor. He gives him his own sword. Now, I do karate, and we get our belts, which show our rank. I'm pretty sure Saul's armor would have been very fancy. Now, when I wear my karate belt, it shows who, I am. It shows my rank. I earned that belt through many hard years of training, through many gradings. I'm not about to go give that to some young little upstart of a white belt who's just joined, has no experience, and let them wear my belt. I might let them wear, so I'm a teacher as well, and if one of my kids forgets their belt, I'll let them wear my old belts that were the same level that they are. But I'm not about to let them wear my current belt. So why did Saul give David his own armor? Something to think about, and maybe something that I can do in another one, something for further study, but an interesting thing there. Anyway, the armor does not fit David. It doesn't suit him. It's not the boots he wants to wear. Let's imagine that little David's wearing his dad's boots because he wants to be like his dad, or he wants to be, I guess, like God, because he knows he is a child of God, so he wants to wear his daddy's boots, if you get me. In that, wearing Saul's armor is like wearing someone else's boots. He doesn't want to do that. That's not the person he aspires to be. David knows who he is in himself. He knows who God has called him to be. And so he can't wear this other armor, but he wears what God has called him to be. So let's go back to that. What happens? He picks out 5 smooth stones from the stream, and all he takes is his shepherd's stick and his sling. Let's continue from chapter 17, verse 41. Little sidetrack there, but let's get back onto it. So, David's got his stones and his sling, and he is facing the giant. The Philistine came on and drew near to David with his shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked at David and saw him, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" The Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the field." But David said to the Philistine, see, David wasn't, Goliath pretty much said, "You're too big for your boots. You're a tall poppy. I'm going to cut you down." But David did not listen to him. What is David's response? "You come to me with a sword and a spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." He knows who he is. "This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. I will give you the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day. I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day to the birds of the air and the wild animals of the earth." So David's saying, "You're going to kill me, I'm going to kill you, so that all the earth may know there is a God in Israel, and that this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by the sword and the spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." Wow. What a defiant statement. This young little kid facing this 9-foot giant, basically saying, you think you're going to kill me? I'm going to kill you. Come at me. I've got the Lord on my side. David too big for his boots? No. His boots were just right, I think, because his boots were given to him by the Lord God. And when you wear the right boots, so good. And so David knew who he was, and every time he came out to battle, as you read on further about David, he becomes this mighty, mighty warrior, and grew into this. Why? Because he had the training. He was faithful in killing the lion and the bear. He knew who he was when he was fighting Goliath, and so every time he went out to battle, he knew the Lord was with him. And whenever someone thought, "Oh, you're too big for his boots," I think it just looks like David got bigger boots. So David faces Goliath. He gets his sling, throws the rock, hits him square in the head, and it says it sinks into his head and he falls flat forward. Now there's something as well. If something hits your head, you'd probably go that way, right? Nope, he falls flat on his face. David runs up to him. Goliath didn't even have time to get out his sword because David pulls it out of his sheath and he cuts off Goliath's head. Now, I don't know how heavy that sword would have been. See this sword behind me? My sword there, it's from Narnia, goes up to about my chin. It's a bit big for me, and it is kind of heavy. That's not even a real sword, so who knows how much a real sword would. It's just a display one, so it's not built for sturdiness. It's not got that weight behind it. Now, if Goliath's spear weighed that much, imagine how much his sword would have weighed. I don't know how David lifted that up to chop off his head. But anyway, that's what happened. The Israelite army overcame the Philistines and they had victory. So, too big for his boots? I don't think so. Because he knew who he was in God. And just like David, we can't go and listen to those voices saying, oh, you're just a youth, you're no one, how dare you? But David knew so clearly who he was. And he says, you come at me with the sword and the spear, but I come at you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. How amazing is that? When you read some of these statements like that, when you read some of these prayers that Abraham and Moses and Elijah on the mountain when he defied the prophets of the false god Baal, we need to get praying bold prayers. I've said this before, but we're like, oh God, if it's not too much trouble, can you please maybe? No. Look, let's pray bold prayers. Let's make bold declarations of, I know who I serve. I know who walks with me. And you, enemy, will be defeated. So I want to bring up one of those bolder prayers that is prayed in the Old Testament. I was giving a few ideas of this with Mum and Dad and some of my friends last night after the prayer meeting. And Mum mentioned this prayer. And I'm like, yeah, that is so right. Because here, someone asked for bigger boots. So looking at 1 Chronicles 4, in 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 10. So there's a guy called Jabez. Now Jabez means bringer of pain. That's what his mum named him. Names are so important in the Bible, and they were often named after some event or something that happens or something that they believe this person is going to be. But their names, Jacob, he was called the deceiver, and he deceived his father to steal his brother's birthright, even though his brother traded it for him. But he lived the life of a deceiver until God called him Israel, and he became the father of many nations. Just like, Abram got changed to Abraham, father of many nations. But Jacob, Israel, was, the 12 tribes and took that nation on. So Jabez, his name was bringer of pain. What a horrible name. I feel sorry for this guy. But he refused to take on the characteristics of his name, and he prayed. So verse 10, Jabez called on the Lord, on God, the God of Israel, saying, Oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my border, that your hand would be with me, and that you would keep me from hurt and harm. And God granted what he asked. So here, oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my border, that your hand might be with me, and that you would keep me from hurt and harm. So what does Jabez ask? He asked for bigger boots. He says, no, I don't want to live under that name, but that you would bless me, that you would place value on me, is what that means. and God granted what he asked. God wants to give us good things. If only we ask, if only we knew who we are in him. One of my favorite verses, Ephesians 3:20, more than we could hope or imagine. I've said it before, but challenge God to that imagination. Challenge God to see what he does. Last week I talked about greater things will you do. If you ask anything in his name, he will do it. So go ahead and ask. And as David prayed, it wasn't so my brother would know. He said, God will give you into my hand, so all Israel will know that the Lord is God, or something around that line. It wasn't so that my brother will know that I'm actually good and not just this some little kid that you can push aside. No, he did it for the glory of God. And whenever we do something for the glory of God, God will be with us. He will give us his victory. So, if you are doing something for God, or even just going about your day and someone's, oh, how dare you? Ask God for bigger boots. See what he will do in your life for his glory. Let him shine for you. Don't hide back. Don't hide your light under a bushel, as it says in Matthew 6. But shine your light for all to see, so people may know that God is the Lord and that he is good. And that light will draw others towards him. So be blessed. I pray this week that you will have bigger boots and that you will walk around in those boots with your head held high. Love you guys. Have a great week. See you next time.